Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cripps from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. Hope you're well, and I hope you've been enjoying your week so far. 4 rounds of fantasy footy are in the can. Let's be honest, it's actually more than 4 weeks of footy. We've been talking about fantasy footy for a much longer period of time than that in 2022. But round 5 is just a mere matter of 24 hours away or less when you're listening to this episode. And man, did a lot go down in round 4 that we've got to discuss heading into round 5. Joining me on this episode, as he does often throughout the season, I got Rids. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, buddy. How you going?
Oh, good. Look, there's a ton we want to get to. In a minute, we're going to talk about Patrick Cripps. He is one of the most popular players in the formats, in fact. And on Monday morning, he was in 38% of AFL fantasy teams, 61% of Supercoach teams, and 48% of Dream Team sides. We want to talk what those coaches should be doing with the Cripps news a little bit later. I want to talk about the aggressive trades that players of all formats could consider and those they might need to look away as we look at some of the popular trade in and out options. Got to talk DPP with them hitting all of the formats at the conclusion of this round. And then, of course, our incredible Patreons, which you can join that supporter group at coachespanel.tv. It's one of the great ways you can show your appreciation and love of the Coaches Panel is join the Patreon supporter group. But they have got a ton of questions that we want to get through. So that is what is on the run sheet for you throughout this podcast episode. But Rids, let's jump back to the start. Patrick Cripps. He's been a beast over the past 3 weeks for us. He's been arguably better than even those that were bullish on him in the preseason could have been. He has been incredible for coaches up till this point in time of the season. The big question we've now got as a dilemma is, do we hold and believe this 1 week narrative? Because he's gone in Supercoach, 132, 162, 119 before that injury issue hit with the high hamstring. And in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team over the first 3 weeks, he went even stronger in some formats, 112, 123, 138 again, all before the high hammy. First question I got for you. Do we believe the 1 week narrative? Because that probably does determine in some formats whether it's an immediate trade or a consideration to hold.
I think this is half the battle, isn't it? Like, we're going to have to try and, I don't know, read the tea leaves a little bit of all the gibberish that's coming out. And we've got to try and work out what's actually real and what isn't. So just looking at history, though, like hammies, and I mean, I shared a video that I saw this morning, and he reached very high, just underneath his cheeks. Like,
just under the glute, yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely high. So that's a concern, okay, in itself. And I don't want to, I have no insight. I'm not in the club.
No.
I don't have any idea. I'm not a medical. I'm just going back to history. That's a high hammy. The way he ran off, but then he didn't, come back, that was a concern to me. That means there must have been something. Yeah, I know they say it's not significant damage.
Sure.
But a lot of strains aren't considered significant damage.
Well, they're the 8 week hammies are the significant ones, aren't they? Not the minor 3 to 4 weeks.
I have just never heard of a 1 week hammy, Jay. I don't know about you. But then to couple in the fact that the week after this one, he has to fly to Perth.
Long flights.
It's a very long flight. And then on top of all that, if you want to just go to the extra one, does he get managed back into it if he, let's not worry about reoccurrence, if he comes back early, but what happens? Does he go forward more? Do we still see the same? Because they've got a very deep midfield now. I mean, we're talking Adam Chera wasn't even being used in the midfield rotations.
And easily probably one of the easiest 4 week fixtures they've got coming up in terms of winnable games and no issue to rush him back for victories.
Yeah, and so, I mean, there's always issues about victories, especially when it comes to Carlton, because Carlton probably have been a bit dryer victories and
Yeah, sure.
building that anticipation and expectation. But he's just been in such good form. It feels like, I don't know about you, but it feels like anyone that owns him across the formats is sort of just like, hey, he got me off to a flyer if you owned him from day dot.
Yep.
Or you've just traded into him.
Yeah.
And now you've got to have to make that decision on, do I trade out of him? And I mean, how many times do we say this? Like, he's just got a history of burning us one way or the other.
Yes.
Across the formats,
Damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. Yeah.
And it does play a part of it, because the thing is, and this is how I view it as well. I see him as a difficult one to read, because I don't know whether this is a purple patch of his best form or whether this is the new fit
normative
Patrick Cripps with the support that he's been screaming for around him, the Hewitts of the world.
Yep.
So it's just an absolute unknown. So I can't tell people what to do or anything like that, but I would be leaning towards trading him, only because of all those bits and pieces. Like, it looked a high hamstring. I've never heard of a 1 week hamstring, so I'm probably leaning towards, this is the one where, and we've had examples the last couple of years where they say it's hammy awareness, I think it's called these days.
Hamstring awareness.
Oh yeah, they should be fine this week, but suddenly it's like, oh no, they're not fine. We're going to miss, and then it drags from 1 week into 3 weeks, And then even then, when they come back, they're never quite right.
The power's not quite there in the leg.
I don't know whether that's more of a mental thing or not, because I'm sure they wouldn't be putting people out on the field that were still injured, but maybe there's a little bit of a mental side of things as well, and
trust the body kind of thing. Yep.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. So I would be going, when in doubt, just trade is my thought process with injuries. Now, we've actually had this discussion many, many times over the years. And when it comes to soft tissue, it's like any doubt when it comes to soft tissue.
Wait another week.
It just doesn't pass the eye test. This one doesn't pass the eye test because it was pretty high. I'm not comfortable holding him because you just don't know. Now, the good news about this, and I say good news, because obviously it's never good news if someone gets injured, is there is the possibility here that you can trade him out and then trade him back into him through the buys.
Yes,
he does have the first buy round.
Correct.
So, but if he misses more than one game, if you think about that, MJ, because what round are we up to?
We're up to round 5, yeah.
So, what are we talking? We're talking about another 6-7 games before the buys start.
Yep.
So he is at the very least, if he misses this week, missing 2 out of that stretch of games. So what is it? Let me do my maths. Sorry, I'll have to count on my hands and toes and everything. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So out of the next 7 games, he at least misses 2.
Correct.
Okay. And there's a distinct possibility, the way that I'm reading it.
It could be 3 or 4 that he misses. Yeah, absolutely.
I 100% think it's more likely 3. If he misses 2, it'll be 3 because of that trip over the Perth. I just don't see any rush for them to rush him back to travel that far. So that's nearly 50% of the next 7 games, MJ. 3 out of 7. I just think that just screams at me saying trade. So I actually don't think it's a discussion on whether hold or trade. If he just doesn't get named tomorrow night, he's out.
Well, he won't.
You just need to trade him.
Yeah, the club have come out and they've kind of tried to have a bit each way with their communication out to everyone. And ultimately, unless you're inside the club, you're just basing it off what they've shared. And they've said, look, he's actually going to be okay. And he probably could play, but we're not going to risk him, is what's the language coming out of the club. But they have been quite evasive. Normally, when it comes to these sort of hamstring issues, it's sent in for scans the next day. Even if they've got to fly back, send in for scans the next day. You see them out the front. Their clubs are fairly good, or players are pretty good these days at saying, yeah, I'll miss a couple of weeks. They've been quite hazy in their communication, which gives me, enough confidence to really reaffirm I'm in the camp that you are, Rids, which is if I was a Cripps owner, regardless of the format, I would much rather trade him out, get myself up to that premium, whether it be to fix up a specific line or get myself a perma captaincy that I that's at the right price point, say a McRae or a Steele who's probably towards his basement. Get the English, get the Doherty, get the whatever, fix up where you need, take the points and run. And if he does come back off the bye after this week, let alone the weeks after the bye, trade back into him then if you love him. But for me, I agree. I think he is a trade. And I personally, the way I play the game, would much rather trade him out for the game I know he misses, him come back after a week and him continue to go on his way. I would much rather that pain than the pain of hold basement cows like the McDonald's, the Wards. Maybe you can flip a Rochelle in there. These high variance cows at M8 and hope and get stuck with 2, 3, or 4 games of missing. I don't want to play the game that way, so I won't be holding.
It's just awkward timing, isn't it?
It is. It's a bad spot to get it.
Yeah, if it's a week later and we know what the DPP gains are, and it's sort of like, wow, but there's just not that many decent bench rookies at this point in time.
No.
Like we've sort of had that little bit of luxury around Rochelle.
Yep.
But I mean, really, Rochelle's either on field or he's a bench. But I mean, it's going to come down. Do you have him in the mid? Do you not? Because we got guys like Hoff, is it?
Yeah, Brady Hoff. Yep.
McDonald's very popular. We got the Wards. So I mean, you may not even be able to utilize, Rochelle in the mids,
Correct.
to cover off a Cripps. So a lot of this will come down to who is your mid cover for Patrick Cripps.
Correct.
And will it be good enough for more than a 1 week basis?
And can you get a look at that cow before having to make that trade?
Yes, correct. And the next thing would be on top of that is, and there's a lot of weird times for games in the next,
it's a long round.
I don't know about you, MJ, but it feels like that these rounds just go forever.
Especially with a Thursday night and a Monday game, it does elongate the round.
So it's really, really difficult because Hawthorn plays that Monday game.
They do.
So a lot of our mid rookies this year are Hawthorn players. So it just doesn't really scream confidence to me. But the problem is when you go in planning whether you're going to trade him or not, you're going to have to almost plan for him to miss 2 and then be surprised he only misses 1. Because if you go in planning that he's going to miss 1 and he misses 2, that's going to be a bit more pain.
That's where it screws you up. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in AF. AF, we're just about venturing, in that 1 down, 1 up capability.
Almost an upgrade season, yeah.
We're just about there and not quite. We've still got a week. And that's why the timing's out. If it was next week, there's potential here that you could get 1 down, 1 up and try and get a decent enough cover for those 2 weeks,
Yeah.
And you could potentially hold him. So it's really, really delicate. But for AF, I 100% believe you just got to trade. It's not even a decision. You just for Supercoach and Dream Team, that decision will have to be around who's your replacement, your Cripps replacement, and are you confident that you'll be able to get at least 2 weeks out of that player? If it's Rochelle, you might be happy days. You might be able to trade into another rookie that could make you potentially get a Rochelle to a mid-bench.
Yep.
But even then, we're expecting people like Nick Martin and a few others to get a little bit extra DPP flexibility after this weekend.
Yes, I agree.
We're just 1 week too early, MJ.
It is the worst week to have a premium get injured for you because you're stuck in no man's land because the guy you might want to move him to hasn't dropped out in value enough for you yet. So in a week's time, it might be perfect to have got a Clayton Oliver and do a 1-up, 1-down using a trade boost in Dream Team and Super Coach. That would have been perfect, but now you can't. So you're right. It's a tough week. I think you've just got to make the best of a bad situation that you find yourself in.
I will say one thing, though. I will say one thing. If you are going to trade him out, just be a little bit, try and foresee the future a little bit. If you could trade him to a round 14 by mid or forward or defender, and then you've always got the opportunity to bring him back in after that round 12 buy. So it is one of those ones where if you could just work out your buy structures, because a lot of people have broken their buy structures getting in these guys.
Fix up trades,
Like, let's think of the Cripps, think of the Tom Greens,
Heaney's.
They've all got round 12 buy.
Yeah.
So you're actually bringing in guys, and you may have brought in, say, a Tim English or, someone that jumped off the screen at you from day one. And you may have actually done a little bit of damage. This is the time of the year that you need to actually work through that buy structure, because you don't want to be absolutely out of whack with it.
No, keep it in mind. For those curious, the round 14 sides that are on the bye round, that's Brisbane, Hawthorn, Collingwood, Melbourne, Fremantle, and North Melbourne. Those are the 6 sides that have that week off. So challenging if you're looking at some Hawks this week with you're potentially flying a little bit blind into them. They'll get the squads along with Geelong named late Saturday afternoon. Potential positive, again, if you are looking Cripps as the option out, they play Sunday afternoon, but then you do have only 6 teams to use as options. So Carlton, Port, Essendon, Fremantle, Hawthorn, Geelong. So really, it's Fremantle and Hawthorn are the teams you're looking at that point in time, if you are taking that buy advice via Cripps into mind. So, that's really the challenge, isn't it, Rids, that coaches find is when they're pulling the trigger on these trades, it's timing, it's the variables. These are all these things that come into mind that great coaches consider and ultimately get some luck along the way and help them succeed.
Because there's going to be a lot of pain across the formats, through the buys, MJ. And imagine if a COVID incident happens through the buys this year. That's going to wipe you out, with the protocols. But that's why, early on, through the preseason and everything else, we're talking about Braden Bruce a lot. But that's why, this is exactly why the ruck spots is the perfect place to actually take a risk if you want. That's why it's a real legit option not to go set and forget and to actually look at a value player. Because if he misses a game, and let's just say Bruce is obviously out this week suspended.
Yes, he is.
You only have one bench option to cover off. So just as long as that bench option comes in, you're pretty much safe. Otherwise you could then explore the magic of DPP and potentially have an English to swing in or whoever else, across the board. And it doesn't take much to have that little bit of luck to have your R3 not just playing, but playing with a lot more job security. I'm talking about Hugh Dixon here.
Yeah, I agree.
With that Natanui news, Dixon already kept Bailey Williams out of that team last week.
Anyway,
So they highly rate the guy. So, and I mean, he doesn't have to be a sole ruck to get what you need from that rookie output. He only needs to really do a 50, 60, and you're covered off.
Well, and it's to that point that you made, because again, we've talked about Bruce a lot. We don't need to spend a lot more time on him, but again, Bruce out is not ideal, sure, but you're not trying to replace a premium in that spot. You're trying to replace a moneymaker with that spot. So a Dixon or a Hayes or an English using DPP, well, you're not trying to replace a premium with a cow. You're replacing a cow with a cow. And so from a points perspective, you're no worse off. I think people have missed the point on Bruce entirely this year. Now, not in a sense of picking him, but they've always contrasted him to versus Grundy versus Gawn. And it's never been Bruce versus Grundy.
It's always been a combination.
Correct. It's who you've got at D6, who you've got at M8, who you've got at F6, and Grundy or Gawn versus Bruce and X, Bruce, and Y, you've got to look at it in totality because, of course, most times a premium is going to look much better off than a money-making option like that. They always do. What we've been blessed with Bruce is for the past 2 weeks is he has pretty much put up premium numbers in that ruck division, and you've been able to activate it, probably another premium in another line where people have rolled a cow.
And that's exactly it.
You're being flanked. I want to talk about a specific cow this week, and I'm keen on your take, and it does lead a little bit to some popular trading. Nathan O'Driscoll is someone that's one of, if not the most traded in player across the formats, and kind of understandable why a lot of coaches didn't jump on him early, didn't play round 1, didn't play through the preseason, sub round 2, had a really good last quarter against the Eagles in round 3 that kind of took him from a probable 40 to 60 odd, I think it was, across the formats. Then last week he has the unicorn breakout game, tons. And now everybody's looking at ways to bring him in. I suppose I've got 2 questions. How do you view his job security? And then second, off the back of that, what are the right players we should be looking to going to Driscoll, if we should be going to him at all? Because I think we might do some damage again to our sides if we're not careful.
So we only have to look at last week, yeah? So let's look at Josh Rochelle, for instance. Yeah. A lot of people were jumping off him quickly. Like, he had a favourable matchup, and he also had a very gettable break-even. He still has one good score away from that cash generation just flying, you know? And I mean, I know we sort of spoke about that briefly last week, but if you look at O'Driscoll, you could potentially, now let's just say Paddy McCartan, for instance.
Yeah,
now,
good example.
Paddy McCartan had that unfortunate incident in the game last week where
he's pretty much off most of the second quarter with that head laceration, I think it was.
Well, the last quarter, I think he was off totally. He had that. He pretty much missed at least a lot of game time, okay? So there's potential he was probably staring a 50-60, you know? But the problem we got is that he's the rookie in the defensive line with almost the best job security across the board. Moving him, you've got to be 100% sure that you're actually trading into a guy that's actually going to be able to cover him. Now, this works, this week. Now, I'm going to be a bit of a fence sitter here, okay?
No, you're giving me both sides of the argument. That's okay.
So the thing is, okay, O'Driscoll's got the DPP. That's the most important thing to think of this.
Yes.
Now, we're expecting guys like Dacos and Hoff to get DPP flexibility after this week.
Yep,
so there is a usefulness. Let's just say if you trade into O'Driscoll just to have as a D6 on-ground problem solver for this week,
sure,
you could potentially move Dacos into D6 after this week.
Yep.
So there is potential there, and always have that link to bounce backwards and forwards. The one thing that I do know is that 100 score is in his rolling averages for quite a while across the
couple more weeks now, yeah.
So he's going to make a lot of money, and money is actually very, very important this time of year.
Yes, it is.
And you think about AFL fantasy, if he can get to about 400,000, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, that's a massive that's huge dollars to be generated.
Yeah, it is.
Now, I'm wary because I looked at that team that played last week for Freo, and I know that we did a little bit of an exercise before the pod. We struggled to find guys that were absolute clear outs. Like, you know, we came up with, what did we end up coming up with? Acres? Aish?
I thought Acres, and again, these are guys that were normally a part of their best 22. Acres, Aish, I think Erasmus is probably going to slide out for Sarong if he's back. Then you're starting to look at guys that from a structural perspective have shown they're really important role players. So the Fredericks, the Walkers, Colliers, again, these are not great big names, but they are important structural pieces. So even if O'Driscoll, I think he gets named this week, you just, I don't know if you can drop a guy after that. It's more the point of, in a week's time, after this week, is he in the gun? because that's almost worse than him not getting picked this week, is you work a way to get him and go, right, I'm fine. And now a week later, you're stuck with another dead cow on your side.
Yeah, and that's half the battle, especially with AFL fantasy, where cash is king around, the early parts of the year, and trying to make the cash. I just don't see anyone else coming through that line, Jack Stein, yes, but I wouldn't want to put my house on anything with him. Brad Hoff is already minimal
borderline
cash generation anyways.
And most people are running DeConning and Skinner as their 7 and 8, who are incremental at best cash movers.
Yeah, so and a lot of people traded up and got a Dawson or whatever else, as that D6 from a McCartan or whatever last week.
Yep.
And again, I couldn't quite understand that thought process either, but that's fine if that's the way it is.
Yeah, if that's the way it is, that's fine, yeah.
But again, there's every chance, especially at this point in time of the season, that we're traded into rookies and we're going to have the same issue week after week after week. So, if you brought in someone last week, let's just say the Collingwood fella.
McInnes, who's also named this week. He was lucky to stay in the team, I thought, but good on him for holding.
It was very lucky. And it's you've been kissed a little bit that he's been named, because if you have a look at those outs, that was a little bit surprising, especially a John Noble or someone else like, to be an out in that instance. But good, it's good to see them back the kids in.
Yeah.
So that's actually okay. But you could have traded yourself into a serious problem if he was dropped. And that's half the battle, isn't it? You don't want to just bring someone in just because they've been named. And the Saint, Windhagen, was another one.
It's the same
He's
dilemma.
He's actually been quite good, yeah.
I thought he was good.
So it's, I think the Brisbane fellows debuting tomorrow night in Loman. But first game of the round without knowing what teams are actually being named on the Sunday and the Monday is going to be really hard.
I think with Loman, you've got to give him a week. In AFL fantasy, I just think you've got to give him a week. And again, the beauty of dream teamers and super coaches is we're much used to waiting for these guys on the bubble before we activate those trades. And Braden Pruce missing this week is a perfect example of why you don't jump early, because you end up getting stuck.
He's also a perfect example of how useful a guy on field is who's not playing.
That's very true too.
He becomes your captaincy loophole this week.
He does. You've got a Lockie Neal, type of option that you roll early in the week.
From the first game, you got McRae early, the second game, and you've got West Coast. What's the
West Coast Sydney. So Mills type if you're an owner there. Yep.
You've got a lot of options, and we don't even know what the Monday game is at this point in time.
And again, the first Saturday game is a Miller v Steele sort of match up through there. So arguably some of the best VC options are early in the round. So I think a lot of people will be using Neal, McRae, Dunkley, Mills if they own him, and potentially even a Brodie Grundy. They might be tempted by last week's numbers and jump there. So
yeah, but that's the whole we've talked about it many times. Having someone not play on any given week doesn't automatically mean you trade them out anymore.
No,
the same thing with Cripps as well, mate. So Cripps could be a very, very handy loophole option if your midfield bench guy plays before you need to trade him out.
You've mentioned him already. Hoff plays Friday night. You get a look at him. Dixon as the coverage for Pruce. You get a look at him now. Again, in AFL fantasy with the utility position, it really opens those kind of DPP moves up more so than anywhere else. Cripps is the Sunday. You could get a look at Rochelle's game on the Saturday afternoon at Adelaide Oval and just have a line marker and go, under 70, I make the trade. Over 70, I'm not saying that's the line, but that's the thought process to make all those educated moves. If my VC gets X and my bench cover gets Y, then I'll do that. That is how you look at it in totality.
100%. And who knows, mate? If Hugh Dixon goes a 30, there's no reason why you can't bring it to Sam Hayes, as your neutral.
I think he gets
this week.
I think he does.
Yeah, and then you could just swap Bruce directly for Sam Hayes and just roll, play a bit of a rookie role.
Yeah, well, Jack Hayes should get named this week too.
I think there was a bit of chat around Tom Campbell potentially being the replacement.
Surely not.
VFL.
Surely
he was
not.
the best player in the VFL last week, so he is an actual option apparently. So again, and Ratton's not the coach this week. I think that came from Brendan Lade, who is going to be the coach. So
yeah, that's true.
So there's still that, you just don't know. Yeah. And like Sherry, unfortunately, is not DPP yet.
No,
this week.
Monday evening he will be, but that doesn't help us this week. So I want to come back to this. I want to talk some DPPs and let's look at that Driscoll to McCartan trade. I'm seeing that as one of the most popular moves in Dream Team and in AFL Fantasy. I think it's a little premature, certainly in Supercoach, where McCartan has still not just got a very gettable break even, but he's shown he's got the ability to hit. I think he's had an 80 plus score kind of rolling through there as his best. So he's got a break even in Supercoach of 27. So that's a walk in a park. So I'm never going to advocate or encourage someone to consider that. He's only made you 84K. And like you said, he's got great job security. But in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, just focus on those formats. You've mentioned Dacos probably getting defensive eligibility. I don't think it's a certainty, but it's a high probability. Would you do a McCartan in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team down to an O'Driscoll, knowing you probably will be able to move Dacos back there next week and just shove O'Driscoll to the bench if he either misses or has a bad score or whatever it is? And that's one of the trades. Or would you only make a move like that if it was getting another a player like a Cornelia or a Crouch up to a premium you want for the year?
So usually I use a rough guide, and it's only very rough, okay? And sometimes it's a little bit higher, sometimes it's a little bit lower. But sure. I usually like an average of about 150,000 per rookie.
Is that across formats?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
So I try and make it simple because I'm only a simple guy, MJ. So otherwise, if you start adding too much, but McCartan's gone up just under 80,000 in Dream Team.
Similar in AF, yeah.
Just got a lot of money that he can make, and it only takes 2 65s, in a row, where it's like suddenly his break even's almost zero. And we've just seen that in Hinge this week, So if you have a look at Hinge, who got injured, so there's a little bit of similarities across the board. But Hinge has got a break even of 23 this week in Dream Team, and I'll just use Dream Team for the example. And he got injured and had a 28 last week, but he had a 70 the week before. It doesn't take much to get a break even in the 20s,
Yes.
So I just think it's silly to be moving these guys with the massive job security quickly, too early, because we got a long season ahead of us. And I can tell you now, Paddy McCartan, if he's fit, and I know that's a big if,
sure,
but if he's fit, he's going to be there every single game for the Sydney Swans.
No question.
That they play.
So is that a Matt Rowell type? And again, Supercoach has always been his preferred scoring format. We've seen that over the better part of the 20 games of his career. Is that a better avenue out to an O'Driscoll, who will make you considerable money? Again, on the premise he's named this week, nobody knows the future beyond that, especially in Western Australia with him still probably at their COVID peak at the moment. Is that a better avenue rather than a McCartan, getting rid of this is maybe a harsh term, but a failed stepping stone? Is that a better avenue in your eyes?
Well, I was an advocate for moving Rowell on last week. This week, however, I'm probably a little bit more 50-50.
Okay.
He's got St Kilda aren't the hardest team to match up on. And they don't. And they're playing you got Jack Steele, obviously, okay,
Crouch.
who's a very, very much a beast, and Crouch is there. So, I mean, there's potential that Rowell, but he matches up against St Kilda a lot better than what he does against Carlton last week.
Yes. Yep.
We were always had that fear that he would do that accountable role, play a lot more contested. But we could see that him playing his team role freed up guys like Noah Anderson and everything else, and Gold Coast came out and won.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think Rowell's in bad form. He actually played very, very good last week.
I thought so too.
His team, the way that he played for the Gold Coast was absolutely great. Unfortunately for fantasy, that sucks a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
That's why I was sort of like, last week I would have gone, yeah, okay, I can understand it because of the Carlton matchup and the likely Cripps. This week's a little bit more difficult because I actually see him with a break even of 40, 45, 50 across the formats going, you know what, that matchup's not bad. I said to you that he scores 100 across the formats this week,
Wouldn't shock me at all.
It wouldn't shock you, would you?
No, and he's already done it this year, so it wouldn't shock me at all.
Now, to free up cash to get ready for your season, or to potentially look at your buy structures, or to get that missing cow that you've missed elsewhere, or that money maker, that's fine. But trading Matty Rowell, and I know I just said a minute ago that Paddy McCartan's the best job security in the defensive rookies, but Matty Rowell's got to almost be the best mid-price with the job security. There's no one better than him.
No one's questioning that. No.
I just think Rowell, if you own him now, you just run him up to his buy, and whatever he makes, but then you just move him on, and cash him in then, or build off him. So that's why I think it was an early move, not a move from now. So
success in this game's all about cash generation and getting cash cows off the ground.
I know
you
didn't ask this question, but let's forget the next 2 weeks, okay? I'm just going to read you out his run, okay? He's got St Kilda and Brisbane in the next 2. Now,
nice.
I don't think St Kilda's a terrible matchup.
No.
Brisbane's probably a little bit difficult, but it is at home, at Metricon. It's not at the Queensland, in Brisbane. Then we got Collingwood, Sydney, Freo, Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn, and North Melbourne leading into his bye.
Okay.
It's not exactly the worst little run, is it? And if he can get a bit of a run for 2 or 3 weeks and, average close enough to 100 for that period, he's got another 150, 200,000 to be made. And I know we're talking hypotheticals, but that run, it doesn't really worry me too much. So I guess
the question I want to ask then on that is, what's the priority? Fixing up these guys, because this is a weird round. We're not, because the cows aren't fully fattened. These premiums that are dripping cash have not quite bottomed out. What's the priority now? Is it these correctional little trades of, and again, using these names loosely, Crouch and Rowell, probably loosely for both of them, because Cornelio, I think, as Supercoach was always a cash cow. Dream Team, kind of a quasi stepping stone. AFL Fantasy, where it was priced high 80s, is a little different story, but is getting kids off the ground the priority, or still the fix-ups the priority?
I still think it's about points. Okay, so if you're sitting there and you just got someone I call wrong, don't sit there and hold them if you're just watching them and it makes you feel awful about it. Let's think of a Josh Kelly, okay? And we say this every year, and we've said it in this preseason. He's a Rolls Royce, mate. He's going to average 120 1 year.
Yep.
I don't have any confidence that he's going to average 120, though, with Leon Cameron as his coach, because the guy just doesn't play him in the right spots. There's enough evidence now to go, you know what, if you own Josh Kelly, you're going to have to look at potentially
there'll be ups and downs.
Because you've got Toby Green coming back in a short period. You've got guys like Taranto going into the midfield. They're tagging, and I don't even know why they're tagging MJ.
They don't need to. Their midfield is good enough to beat anyone head to head.
Well, you think
based
about
on quality
Fremantle
of
last
options.
week, okay? And I know that we already highlighted that there was likely to be a tag going into Andy Brayshaw last
Sure.
week. But why not just play Kelly against Brayshaw head to
And beat
head
him.
and tell him, you know what? If you break even, we're going to back everyone else because we think they're only a one-man team.
Yeah.
I just don't quite understand the thought process with GWS.
Yep.
Because, like, I don't know about you, but I would back a Cogs. I would back a Green. I would back a Taranto.
Kelly. Yeah,
You know, it
agree.
just doesn't stop. Like, and I think they sort of limit themselves a little bit by tagging, but they are. So, again, this week, we're probably going to look at Melbourne. They're not going to not tag again. They're going to go in and tag. I don't know who it is.
I think they do the
Petrarca,
double.
Oliver.
I think they go both,
Well,
which I don't like at all.
I think
they'll
they'll
do the
probably go Petrarca when he's in the midfield, and then Oliver when Petrarca's
Petrarca
forward.
goes 50. Yeah, it's a fair shout.
Who knows what they do, you know? Like, they're just a mystery. And we've already seen it with Braden Pruce. At least now, we should have 100% confidence. Anyone saying that Braden Pruce is not the number one ruck from GWS
No, he clearly
right
is.
now
Clearly
has not watched the game in the last 2 or 3 rounds. He is their clear number one.
Yeah.
So there's not even a question about that. So it's not going to be a question on whether he won't or will be selected after he comes back from suspension. It's going to be more, will he be selected with Matt Flynn? And Matt Flynn be that forward that we've always said is a better forward who pinch hits in the ruck. Because we could see over the last couple of weeks with Bruce, they lose a lot of let's just say a lot of stoppages. A lot of stoppages. They're very soft. They give up a lot of goals. You know, it's just too easy when Braden Pruce isn't there. Yeah. And let's just, again, MJ, let's just talk. Braden Pruce is almost the dumbest man on earth doing what he did last week.
Seriously, he's finally fit and healthy. And then he's
been waiting for how many years?
A couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to be the number one. He finally
he's now the number one. And
he's
what does
finally
he do?
fit. He
starts throwing elbows.
Just reckless.
And he, like, even in the preseason, we could say, look, he was just, you know, a little bit over the top. He's more clumsy. That was nothing to do with clumsy.
Yeah, that's
on the
reckless.
Weekend.
Nothing.
That was just
silly.
Nuts.
Brain fart. That's silly.
You know, so, and he's going to be a ride. Everyone's probably feeling it already, aren't they? But he's going to be a ride.
That'll make a lot of money, though.
And he's going to score a lot of points. And I said this on the weekend, because a lot of people were carrying on about Max Gawn's score, radio in AFL Fantasy. It was a beauty. There's no problems about that. But again, we're not talking about a Pruce and Gawn comparison.
No, of course we're not.
Pruce was 48% off the price tag of Max Gawn at the start of last week. So 48% of 140 was something like 67 points. That's all he needed to do to get the equivalent of 140. People have lost the plot if they're comparing, you know, Pruce to Gawn.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But it's just like, I just wanted to highlight how dumb he is. He's finally the clear number one, and then he throws a bloody elbow. It's like, oh my goodness. But what a ride we're going to have with him. And
it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be hilarious. And we're going to be talking about Pruce in 2 more weeks because the way
I'm sure we will.
I think he's a rugby union player.
It wouldn't shock me.
Someone's told him, you know, through hypnosis in the preseason that he's a rugby union player because the way he's been tackling is bridging on careless and reckless anyways. Yeah. So, and he's a big man. He's a big man.
I would not want to be playing against him, that's for sure. All right, let's talk about these DPP names and maybe fly through them quickly before we get to some of our Patreon questions and wrap up your episode. They land Monday after round 5 concludes across the formats, heading into round 6. That's what is happening. AFL fantasy coaches, you're really used to this. Dream teamers and super coaches, brand new experience. The quick heads up is Champion Data, who are the brand behind the brands. They are the ones that allocate the position. They need a minimum of 3 games played. So if they've played less than that, they're not going to be considered. And 35% in a specific position on field. And the normative equalizer for them is where they are at centre bounce, where they are positioned on field. That is a really important piece of the puzzle. I want to run through a few defenders, a few midfielders. I think there's only one ruck. Cherry, he gets it. Let's move on. And the forwards. I've listed most of these at coachespanel.tv. I'm very keen on your take, Rids, on these and who else might be. Just earlier on a Wednesday afternoon too, Fantasy Freako, which is kind of a brand in front of Champion Data, said there's something like 50 odd names that are in the mix of DPP, which feels a lot, if you ask me. So let me run you through some defenders. Tell me if any of these are not going to get it or if there's any I've missed. To add defensive status, Luke McDonald, Brandon Ellis, Dane Zorko, Angus Brayshaw, Jordan Clark, Scott Pendlebury, Nick Dacos, Josh Battle, Josh Kennedy of the Swans, and
So
David
Scott Pendlebury,
Swallow.
he's got to be a concern, yeah?
I think he's 50-50 if he has another midfield game like the past 2 weeks.
So maybe it's a blessing that Adams and everyone's coming back this week.
Yeah.
So this week's going to be very, very important for Scott Pendlebury. I think there's enough history now for Dacos to probably, it doesn't really particularly matter as much this week.
Yeah.
But it'll just put him more on the fringe of should we, shouldn't we, or anything like that.
Yeah.
Brad Hoff is the obvious one.
Hoff's the one. Yeah. Good shout.
If
he's named, he'll be there. Yeah,
there's 100%. He's been playing across halfback, and can I just say as well, he looked a lot better last week in that win. So he may actually be settling into a role.
Yeah, once he's settled and kind of a little bit more of the cavalry's kind of landed for them now, he does look much better. I agree.
I'm very interested though with Angus Brayshaw whether they wait for more data, like until Salem comes back or not. There has been history before when a player plays predominantly a position when someone important has been like injured and not playing. The problem with that though is Brayshaw was starting across halfback anyways.
Yes.
While Salem was playing in round one.
Yeah, so, correct. But again, they were missing some of their premiership stars in that game anyway. So was him covering for an injury now is further compounded him covering for an injury.
So the only guy I'd look at from that list, okay, outside of Dacos, obviously, but everyone should be owning Dacos anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
And can I just say as well, if Dacos does get defender status, he could almost become a premium. And like he is that good.
He's that good. Yeah, I wouldn't bank it, but you could almost cash that check.
I think Luke McDonald. I
love Luke McDonald.
Such an intriguing.
He's under 400K in Supercoach.
But there was something that I like. Everyone noticed, obviously, but particularly Megan. A massive shout out to Damo, who messaged me just before the ball was bounced and said Zeebel's been named at full forward, and he's paying $30-40 odd dollars for the first goal scorer. And I thanks Damo, but I jumped on and got a little collect out of that. But that was more important from Luke McDonald aspect, I think.
Correct.
I think that's more, Zeeble in that rubbish, whatever that role was in the last 18 months, is now dead. That role
he was so much better in the forward line.
He's been their best forward for years, MJ. Why isn't he not playing? It's just baffling, yeah?
Yeah, he's going to stay there. I really like, again, maybe this is creative trading for some. I really like the idea of a Cripps down to a McDonald. If that might just be enough cash to do another creative trade, knowing that you can flip McDonald, I would take it to the bank. He's a defender next week. And now all of a sudden, then you can look at how do I turn my D6, my D7? How do I turn them into my M9, my M10? Because you'll be able to flip him back there. He's that good. Right now, he's running it. Remove that Brisbane game where they were demolished. He's running at nearly 110 in Supercoach and 93 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team with that game out. That's his potential.
So I'll just throw an interesting one. I'm just going to throw an interesting thought process out there for people, and they can maybe say yes or no or call me a fool, whatever. But let's just say you're still running Dylan Stevens in Supercoach.
Sure.
Why wouldn't Is Cripps and Dylan Stevens to Luke McDonald and Jade Gresham a good trade or not a good trade in Supercoach?
I think it all depends on where you forecast they'll be to the year. Because at this price point, you're probably banking them to hopefully run them up at the very least to their buy, if not till the end of the year. But to me, that's the kind of creative trading I like to see. I'm a big fan of that type of move. It's taking a premium that's missing, potentially a dead cow, and turning them into guys that are going to be knocking on the door of the top 10 in their respective lines.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the sort of move you could be making at some stage. And you could very well be landing yourself a premium season-long keeper defender. And I think there's enough that I've seen from Jade Gresham to say, hey, he could be very handy as a forward, you know?
Yep, especially
in
a
large chunk. Especially in Supercoach. But that's the sort of moves I would be exploring with Cripps.
Yeah, I like that. We were talking about adding midfielders. It adds versatility and flexibility in your side.
Yeah.
Heaney, Butters.
Let's just go blah, blah, blah. Who
cares? Yeah. Okay, let's go to the forward line because I've said Cherry's the ruck. Here's a couple of names. I don't think this guy gets it anymore, but Rowan Marshall, if Ryder was playing, could have done enough. Here's some other names that will be in consideration, though. Luke Parker, Tom Liberatore, Noah Bolter, Todd Goldstein, Tom DeConning, Darcy Fort, Connor McDonald. I think James Harms is going to be in that conversation.
So I just want to throw out Marshall, okay? And I know you're still rattling off names, but people can go to this website and look at names.
Yeah, coachespanel.tv have got them here. Yep.
Exactly. I don't know where it is, but everyone else can look it up. Google must have it somewhere. So Rowan Marshall, okay, let's not forget, round one, he played predominantly ruck.
And
round
he's a beast.
Two, though,
50-50.
Hayes took a lot of ruck time from him in round two.
Yeah, it might have
And
even
then
been
round
60-40.
And round four, we had Ryder back who played predominantly ruck for both of those.
That's true.
I reckon Rowan Marshall, even if he plays 90% ruck this week,
still might be on the line.
Strong chance of getting his forward eligibility.
Well, and if a Tom Campbell does come in over a Hayes, as you flagged, as one of the coaches had said he's a consideration, well, okay, again, even a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, he's there. And again, Marshall, as the lead ruck, is as good a scorer in our ruck division as we have, let alone in our forward division. The other two guys I want to throw in that I think they're going to be considered. I don't think they'll get it, but I think they'll be considered. Bailey Smith from the Bulldogs. The other one I'm keen on your take, Jason Horne-Francis. His midfield and CBAs, the trend is only going heavier into the midfield. I'm interested. He was one people had kind of locked in at the start of the year for being someone at this point in time of the year we'd have in the midfield and then moving into the forward line. But from a centre bounce attendances perspective, which, like I said at the start, that's one of the factors for champion data that I use in that. Here's what his percentage has done, just so you know, for Jason Horne-Francis. 26% CBAs round one, then 55, 59, and 76.
Did you know whether CD take in the language from the North Melbourne coach in his press conferences into consideration for these positions?
Well, it's why a lot of people
David
benched
Noble,
Francis last week because of that.
I did it, and I tell you now, David Noble, you naughty little man. Seriously, you did that just to play games with all of the fantasy coaches.
That's all
I tell you. And why would he come out in the media and talk up him playing more forwards? He likes how he can take a mark, be an awkward matchup, kick goals, and then play him all centre.
Three quarters at CBA.
And not just has he absolutely ripped everyone who put him on the bench because we paid attention, because that's what we do as fantasy coaches. We listen, we go, rightio, we're going to predict this. We're going to put him on the bench and we're going to play Josh Ward in his 9 disposal highlight reel last week, because Sam Mitchell comes out and says, hey, David, hold my beer. Hey, Josh, and it's like, this is painful, mate. There's no chance. There's more chance of me, I don't know, catching COVID again tomorrow after having it only a week ago, then Horn Francis getting DPP, unfortunately, this change. Bailey Smith, though, is the interesting one, isn't it? And there's another name as well that you may not have called out, but I've sort of lost interest when you're rattling off names. Did you mention Max Gawn?
No, but I think he's in the mix.
They're the two, Gawn and Bailey Smith. So what
If
people
they get it, wow.
And this is how fickle we are as a fantasy coach, okay? Last week, the people that started Gawn was going, you little ripper, we've got Gawn. But, he's going massive. But the flip side of that is he's unlikely to get DPP gain and forward eligibility if he keeps posting those numbers. So just be careful what you wish for at times as well, okay, and what you're cheering for, because that opens up a massive, 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 huge name in your forward lines if you can move a Gawn into the forward lines.
And amazing flexibility.
Bailey
to
Smith,
get you
though,
through the year.
Let's be absolutely honest. Bailey Smith starts forward and then just says, listen here, mullet man, go run wherever you want and you cause as much havoc as you possibly can. And I just want you to run end to end to end to end. Because he plays more, like he doesn't play forward pocket.
He's a high half forward that becomes an extra midfielder.
He's just an extra mid. And I know that's starting positions, but that's one of the flaws in these positions, is it not? These starting positions, so it gets me a little bit annoyed at times. But we've seen some real weird DPP gains and across the years. But good luck to them. Mitch Duncan being one this year to start with.
Yeah,
there's no way known he played forward for even 5 minutes of a game last year. That's just where he started.
Starting positions and how he played.
Go out there, shake the hand of your opposition player, and you just roam the rest wherever you want to go. Just go.
The wings are yours, my friend. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all lands. Like I said, end of this round, they'll drop. We'll make sure we share them for you at coachespanel.tv. Honestly, they'll be all over social media too. So you won't have to look too hard or too far to find them. But at the conclusion of Monday's games, they'll hit. And because AFL Fantasy, Dream Team, and Supercoach are all using champion data and the same formula, they'll be the same, identical across the formats. So that's positive for us, albeit they'll be at different price points and break evens and cycles and elements like that. That's a really positive factor for us through there. All right, Rids, let's jump into some of our Patreon questions. Before we do wrap up this episode, of course, if you want to become a Patreon supporter of us, we'd love you to do it for as little as a couple of bucks a month. There are some great rewards that come your way. There's community and hidden groups to be a part of. There's a bunch of other stuff. But let's jump into some of these questions. If you want to become a Patreon, though, coachespanel.tv is there. John's got a question for you, Rids. He wants to know, do you think, just generally, without seeing his team, is Treloar someone that could be a season-long hold? He doesn't just want to wait trades on guys that he's not intending to be end-of-year premiums. Is Treloar an end-of-year premium?
Yeah, he is, but only due to history. There's a little bit of a smell about his last couple of games. I don't see him getting that consistent CBAs required to be at his
trending poorly. Just so you know, 57, 64, 45, and 12% are his CBAs.
It's not great. It's a worry. So yes, he is, but only because of what he's done previously. So I would be fearful, though, that if I traded into him, that I'd be trading out of him, around the bye.
And especially, like you said, if Marshall, if Gawn, if Smith, and even in Supercoach, I'd add Liberatore into that component too. We know when he plays through the mids, the guy's a contested beast. You could be locking yourself, might be too strong of a term, trading into a guy that even if he is a very good option by the end of the year, he might not be good enough of an option to roll through.
Liberatore is an interesting one. Does he get looked at for forward eligibility?
I think he gets forward DPP. Libba,
Does that mean
I think he
Super
does.
Coach is a real option then?
I think in Supercoach, he's a real option for us. The challenge will be how many of these dogs, because English, McRae, Bont, Dunkley, then you throw in a Liberatoria if he gets DPP, let alone a Bailey Smith. And if you've gone a Caleb Daniel, who's probably more relevant than Bailey Dale, that's a lot, not just from one team, but from one buy round. That's a lot.
Anyways, sorry, I digressed.
No, no problem at all. Peter's got a question. What's the bigger priority, Raul, Crouch, or Cornelio?
You know what I feel about this, like, because we've chatted. I've got serious cogs concerns.
In AF,
I think there's a massive smell. Like, Super Coach and Dream Team is okay because his price was so low.
Yeah, there's no
in
risk.
AF, his price was so high. It was just ridiculous.
Well, people were picking him over, you picked him over Heaney or him over Butters. That's
which is
the concern.
good. That was actually good because it made you have to choose between A or B and not just get A, B, and C.
Correct.
So from that perspective, it's good. But from this perspective, he's around 12 by MJ.
Yeah.
And if you've got concerns now before Taranto pushes his way in because Toby Green's back, there's massive. It just doesn't smell right, does it?
No, to me, I feel like that's the priority of the others. Even though he's had some good games, again, this is purely AFL fantasy. That I'd be really quite comfortable moving him on. Jason wants to know, have the early rounds changed any of your thoughts of who are the best players on each line? Without going through the names, have you moved too drastically away from who you think are the best of the best line?
I think in the midfield you have to. I think Andy Brayshaw's really made that jump.
Yeah. And probably his two biggest tag games are now in his rear vision mirror, based on the fixture. So
I think it's Andy Brayshaw a little bit in the midfield.
Yep.
I don't know. Has anyone jumped out to you? I haven't seen anyone else really jump out.
No, because I thought the guys that are really firing across the formats, I thought Dunkley, Taranto were always going to be in and around that spot. I thought Short. Duncan. Yeah. And again, let alone the guys we get. Short's maybe gone from a top 10 to a top 5 to me.
And I think Whitfield, it's probably the other way. I think
they probably
Whitfield as top 5 and I had Short just around the top
just
10.
Outside it.
But I think I've swapped them both now, and I've got no confidence on Whitfield, although he started running the game out a lot better.
He did look better as it went on. Yeah. Look, nothing massively to me. In the midfield, I think Brayshaw's the guy that looks to be the one. And again, some DPPs might pop this week, and then ultimately for you, Jason, we might need to abandon off that. Ian,
but I'll tell you what, though, I'll just, before we go any further, I do think Proof's average-wise in the rucks has jumped. I never expected him to be...
He's better than I thought he would be, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, 75, 80 was going to be his limit, but, I mean, every second week he's suspended or he's missing games, but he's looking at he could be a 95 type ruck. Like
it is the Riley O'Brien type of season, isn't it? From his, breakout year at the Crows. I think, what was that, 2018 or 2019?
And I think
it does feel like that.
I think with the Fremantle guy not playing as well as what he has been.
Darcy, yeah.
And with your fella over in Adelaide, the guy who's running gate is awful. I reckon Bruce could potentially match those guys. And we don't have a clear number 3 ruck at this point in time from what I'm looking at.
No.
I don't think I'd...
Maybe English might be the clear number 3, but again, I think people are playing him forward and using his ruck status, but not playing him.
You could almost have him as your R2, but play him in the forward line with cheaper Bruce as your ruck in that instance.
Yeah, and I think that's the right play too.
And Witts is potentially around that mark as well.
Probably Supercoach.
It's probably the rucks that I'm more surprised with than anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. Both Stephen, we'll get to Stephen's question quickly. Ian, we've answered a few of your questions there about Cripps and some of those Hawks kids. Last 2 questions. AFL fantasy question from Stephen. Assuming he trades out Cripps undecided, Who's the best replacement? His options that he's got. So give us your name out of these four: Laird, Mills, McRae, or Bailey Smith. Who do you like more out of those?
Can I choose the fifth option and say
Yeah.
Brayshaw?
Yep,
But I mean, Laird looked heaps better last week.
he did.
I just think Brayshaw's almost getting into that category of he's going to be in the top 8 mids for the year. And if you want to get him now, I think after the two smaller tagged, I say smaller tongue in cheek, but his time on ground and his CBAs and everything's just trending perfectly.
It's got a good matchup against Essendon this week, that's for sure.
Well,
the thing is,
he's going big.
He's at 980k though, and for 60k less, you can get McRae.
Yeah, but that'd only be a worry if it's a Keys or someone like that you're looking at, like, not a Brayshaw. A Brayshaw, I just think's the real deal.
Yeah, no, all right, fair enough too. And then let's go for one last question from Surium. DT question: do we use the trade boost to go early on cows, or do we do a 3 down, 2 up over the next couple of weeks? It probably got answered when you talked about Rochelle, really, about going early on cows.
No, but I think he's talking about available cows to be traded into. But I mean, that should have been asked 2 weeks ago then, like when there was the rookies were on the bubble. Just a quick one too with the DPP. Connor McDonald must be a chance to get forward.
Yeah, I think he gets that as well. Hey man, appreciate your work today on this episode, mate. As always, a pleasure.
Yeah, why not? And shout out to Louis. Hope you get well too, young fella.
Yeah, absolutely. True that. If you want to go and check out any of the articles we've dropped this week, they're available for you at coachespanel.tv. It's a big round of fantasy footy. Starts Thursday night, wraps up Monday afternoon. But we'll be back to review it all for you for our Patreons, and as well, articles dropping every single day during the week that you can check out at coachespanel.tv. Enjoy your week. I hope your captain kills it. You win rookie roulette. And from all of us here at the Coaches Panel, we'll chat to you soon.